Hello there, geeks and gamers. It is I, Jesse Milestone, bringing you fluffy hair and some of my thoughts about the writers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, who took that wonderful show Game of Thrones that so many of us loved, lit it on fire, threw it into a dumpster, and are now on to our precious Star Wars franchise. Got some thoughts about this. They're not what you may think, though, right? Because there's one element of this storytelling, of the storytelling they have done throughout Game of Thrones, that I think we are overlooking, and rightfully so, because we're very distracted by certain things like rushing the finale, like taking characters with beautiful arcs and completely ruining their arcs, like making very unsatisfying conclusions for many important plot points and just completely neglecting, glossing over, and ignoring others. There's lots to be mad about in this last season of Game of Thrones, especially in the way that everything wraps up, and I don't fault anyone who's still very fixated on that dumpster fire of an ending that we were given. However, the bit we're overlooking is the identity politics, or in my opinion, the distinct lack thereof. You can look at the show and see, there's a lot of powerful female characters in it. There have been since day one, since the beginning. And yeah, over the past couple of seasons, there have definitely been some more of those girl power moments that have snuck their way in. Some of them haven't felt totally organic. Some of them have felt a little shoehorned, but they are fairly few and far between. For the most part, your female characters are well-written, non-Mary Sue, diverse female characters that make sense in the world in which they live. And that's the whole thing. I don't think we have a problem with strong women, right? With powerful female characters, with well-written female leads. It's just, the two issues we have are when, again, they're not well written, when they're Mary Sue's, when they have no motivations or no justifications for being who they are, it's that they're women and therefore great, and when they're built up in contrast and at the expense of the male characters around them. And that's the thing that we're overlooking right now, right? And I know, I get it, we as a culture are conditioned to just only pay attention to the women and neglect all the men, but we're overlooking that, and there are a lot of great male characters in Game of Thrones as well, not all of whom got what they deserved, not all of whom were written through to a satisfying conclusion, Jaime Lannister, but there are some examples that I think we should take a look at. Who are the characters who, for the most part, end happily? The male characters who, for the most part, end happily in this series. You got Bran. Bran's the king of everything. Bran's, that's like he's your just little crippled nerd boy who can't run out and play with the others, but he knows all the things. He's super smart. There's your win for intellectualism right there. There's your nerd win. You got Sam, the chubby guy who gets the girl. He's your underdog story, right? You're nice. I mean, and all these, I'm reducing these to these stereotypes right now, but these are nuanced characters that have been built up in these important ways. You got good guy Davos Seaworth, who's just, your dad, your uncle, your grandpa, not the kind of creepy uncle that touches you, just like the good kind of uncle, who's manly and sails ships, but he's not, warlike and toxic, and, he's just good dude. He ends up surviving to the end. He ends up on a council, helping to rule Westeros. You got Bronn. Bronn is your, what the feminists would call a classic example of toxic masculinity, who also ends up very happily on this council, master of coin, advocating to rebuild the brothels instead of the ships. You got Pod. You got Sir Podrick, who ends up as a gold cloak, who ends up in a knightly role, and Pod is just sort of your all-around good guy. Nice, sweet, harmless, but still very manly and pleases the ladies in bed. So he's not an emasculated character at all. In fact, he grows into his masculinity over the course of the show by impressing the ladies and learning how to fight with a sword and becoming a knight. So he's sort of a classic, growing up tale. And then, of course, Tyrion Lannister, our most complex and nuanced guy, who arguably gets a happy ending, even though he doesn't want to be hanged. He survives, he gets to drink, he gets to live in a castle, and he finally gets the respect that he doesn't admit that he wants, but clearly feels he deserves throughout the course of the show. And he's a little person. So all of these very, very diverse male characters end happily. They get a happy ending. From the toxic man who just wants to F bitches, down to the various cripples and broken people, etc. And that's a big deal. None of these happy endings come in contrast, built up or torn down by a woman around them. These are just their characters' arcs. Their characters follow to this conclusion. And like I said, that is kind of a big deal. Now, I know some people might take issue and look at this and be like, well, you've got the crippled boy and you've got the dwarf, so, I don't know, identity politics, maybe there's some sort of commentary about ableism and being handicapped and stuff in here, and that's possible, but my two counters to that point are that nothing Tyrion has or Bran has is because they're broken or disabled or less than capable. Nothing in the show has been about. First of all, it's not even been about them making their disability into their strength, which is the classic identity politics way to go with that one. And it's also not been a super focus. Tyrion being little is not like, well, the world is not as accessible for him. That's mostly been like, it's hard to get laid because he's considered ugly. Bran not being able to walk, it doesn't really, it's really mostly been just a plot device to keep him kind of in Winterfell until he needs to go on that journey to become the Three-Eyed Raven. But him not being ambulatory is more of a plot device than an actual important element of his character that defines everything he is, and etc. Being the Three-Eyed Raven and knowing the entire history of Westeros is a much more defining feature of his character. The things he knows and the shift in his personality and becoming this are all a lot more important to his character and much more interesting, better plot points. So I'm not seeing that ableist narrative in that regard, which is nice, which again, it gives me a certain amount of hope. These aren't the reasons these characters are powerful. They're not excuses for these characters. They're not, the core reason these characters are good or well-written or great. So that, again, nice, positive, good, happy feelings regarding that, all of these people. And now I know what you're going to say. What about Jon Snow? Jon Snow was supposed to be the hero, right? That's how the writers were setting him up over the past several seasons. They clearly plucked him out of the lineup in a way that Martin has not really done in the books, right? If you're back through in the plot lines in the books, there are a lot of different characters who have very key roles to play, and it's not clear who the most important is. In fact, the whole purpose of the narrative is to pull you in different directions into thinking who the most important one is, or that different people think they are the most important. But the showrunners clearly took that stance. Benioff and Weiss very clearly took a stance and pushed Jon Snow out in front as the hero, only to sideline him for a lot of the season and then push him over a cliff, essentially. Jon Snow does not have a happy ending per se. I would say it's a very bittersweet ending. He ends up, just going beyond the wall. His life is spared. And he has to murder the one he loves, though, which is clearly, as you can see from his very constipated face throughout the rest of the episode, leaving him permanently scarred. It's the second time a love of his has died in his arms. So he is not getting, even though he gets to live and be free, etc., he's damaged goods there. He's not getting that happy ending. And why is that? Why is that? Because Jon bought into feminism. That's why. Dany, along with Cersei, is your great allegory of third-wave feminism in this show, is your example of what happens when a woman feels that everything she doesn't have is because evil men took it away from her, and goes on a rampage to take vengeance on all of the evil men, and everyone's like, that seems fine because those men are evil, but where does it stop? It doesn't. It just goes on and on and on and on. And back when she seemed like a reasonable person who just wanted to liberate people and do good for the world, Jon bought into the narrative. He bought it in hook, line, and sinker. Oh, babe, you're hot, and if I agree with you, you'll sleep with me. And now that you're sleeping with me, I'm on board with everything that you're saying. And because he bought in to the third-wave feminist narrative, that is why he falls. That is why he trips and falls flat on his face. And I know that's not satisfying for us. It's not what we wanted for him. It's not what we wanted to see for him. For a lot of people, when you set him up as that hero, as that main character, he becomes the character you relate to. He's the character you're rooting for, that you want that happy ending for. But if you dial back and realize that that's what happened, right? That he sacrificed his morality. He sacrificed the thing that made him good and pure and the one who should have been the hero in favor of getting some, because that's the reality is that's what happened. We all knew that was happening. He didn't do the whole she's my queen out of an insane amount of loyalty. He did it because he loved her, because he had feelings for her, because he thought with the incorrect head, as it were, and because of that he fell victim to the evils of third-wave feminism and just fell flat on his face. So when we take a look across that, right, we have a whole slew of different kinds of men, from your more traditionally masculine ones to your less traditional men, who all end happily, who all end alive, in some cases with other people, getting the things that they deserve. And you get the man that buys into feminism ending miserably. Grey Worm, you can look at him. Was the male feminist from the start, right? And he loses. Guess what happens? Guess what? Classic male feminist. Don't get laid. He ain't getting laid because his girlfriend's dead. And I don't know how much junk he actually has down there and whether or not it works, so he might just not be getting laid anyway. Wow, what a great metaphor. The man who's the male feminist is literally castrated. Interesting how that works. Now you could say I'm just reading into this, but I really do think that these elements are in there. They're in the story. This is, and even if they weren't conscious, even if Benioff and Weiss didn't sit down and go, let's write a narrative about interesting women and interesting men that doesn't involve identity politics, that's still their perspective. The way their perspective comes out is not steeped in identity politics. It's not all about this is the man and this is the woman and woman is good and man is bad. So that alone means that when they go forward to tackle something like Star Wars, that's not where their mind is. Their mind is not going to sit down to the script and be like, all right, let's see how many people of color we can write into the script. They are going to try. They may not succeed. They are going to try to sit down and write a decent story. Now, I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of trepidation still about them going into this trilogy because I'm not convinced they know how to write a good character arc. I'm not convinced they know how to pace a story correctly. I do have a lot of these writing concerns, but the concern I don't have is that they're going to beat me over the head with identity politics until I want to throw up in my mouth. And it's a small win, but hey, it's a win. And at this point, I will take it. I will look for the good in the bad. I will search for that one gold coin in the steaming pile of dog shit. And I don't know, maybe you're still not ready for that. Maybe you're still just want to be mad about it, and that's totally cool. You have every right. But maybe when we're ready to start healing and moving forwards, maybe this will help give that tiniest glimmer of hope that maybe not everything will be awful forever. Just, most things. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure, smash the melee button, as the J-Man would say. Drop your comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Agree, disagree? What are your concerns? Is there something I missed? Please let me know. If you like this, I'll be back on Geeks and Gamers very, very soon. And if you want more of me, you can always go over to Mindless Entertainment and see me all the time. That's all I got for you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.